Chapter 23. Grandfather's Companion. That evening, when the tour of the factories was over, instead of returning to his office as was his custom, M. Wulfrun told Perrine to drive straight to the chateau. For the first time, she passed through the magnificent iron gates, a masterpiece of skill that a king had coveted, so it was said, these wonderful iron gates, which one of France's richest merchants had bought for his chateau. "Follow the main driveway," said M. Wulfrun. For the first time also, she saw close to the beautiful flowers and the velvety lawns which until then she had only seen from a distance. The beautiful blossoms, red and pink masses, seemed like great splashes on the verdure. Accustomed to take this road, old Coco trotted along calmly, and as there was no occasion to guide her, Perrine was able to gaze right and left of her and admire the flowers, plants, and shrubs in all their beauty. Although their master could not see them as formerly, the same attention and skill was showered upon them. Of her own accord, Coco stopped before the wide steps, where an old servant, warned by the lodge-keeper's bell, stood waiting. "Are you there, Bastien?" asked M. Wulfrun. Without getting down, "Yes, sir." "Then take this young girl to the butterfly room, which is to be hers in the future. See that everything is given to her that she needs. Set her plate opposite of mine at table. Now, send Felix to me. I want him to drive me to the office." Perrine thought she was dreaming. "We dine at 8 o'clock, said M. Wulfrun. "Until then, you are free to do as you like." She got out of the carriage quickly and followed the old butler. She was so dazed that it was as though she had been suddenly set down in an enchanted palace. And was not this beautiful chateau like a palace? The monumental hall, from which rose a wonderful stairway of white marble, up which ran a crimson carpet, was a delight to the eyes. On each landing, exquisite flowers and plants were grouped artistically in pots and jardinières. Their perfume filled the air. Bastien took her to the second floor, and without entering, opened the door of a room for her. "I'll send the chambermaid to you," he said, leaving her. She passed through a somber little hall, then found herself in a very large room draped with ivory-colored cretonne patterned with butterflies in vivid shades. The furniture was ivory-colored wood, and the carpet gray, with clusters of wildflowers, primrose, poppies, cornflowers, and buttercups. How pretty and dainty it was! She was still in a dream, pushing her feet into the soft carpet when the maid entered. "Bastien told me that I was to be at your service, mademoiselle," she said. Here stood a chambermaid in a clean, light dress and a muslin cap at her service, she who only a few days before had slept in a hut on a bed of ferns with rats and frogs scampering about her. "Thank you," she said at last, collecting her wits. "But I do not need anything, at least I think not." "If you like, I will show you the apartment," said the maid. What she meant by "show the apartment" was to throw open the doors of a big wardrobe with glass doors and a closet, then to pull out the drawers of the dressing table in which were brushes, scissors, soaps, and bottles, etc. That done, she showed Perrine 2 knobs on the wall. "This one is for the lights," she said, flashing on the electric light. "And this one is the bell if you need anything. If you need Bastien," she explained, "you have to ring once, and if you need me, ring twice." How much had happened in a few hours! Who would have thought, when she took her stand against Theodore and Taluel, that the wind was going to blow so favorably in her direction? How amusing it was! Their ill-feeling towards her had itself brought her this good luck. "I suppose that young girl did something foolish," said Taluel, meeting his employer at the foot of the steps. "I see she is not returned with you." "Oh no, she did not,"
replied M. Voufron. "But if Felix drove you back, as I passed the chateau, I dropped her there so that she would have time to get ready for dinner." "Dinner? Oh, I suppose—" He was gasping with amazement, and for once he could not say what he supposed. "You do nothing but suppose," said M. Voufron tartly. "I may as well tell you that for a long time I have wanted someone intelligent to be near me, one who is discreet and whom I can trust. This young girl seems to have these qualities. I am sure that she is intelligent, and I have already had the proof that I can trust her." M. Voufron's tone was significant. Talouel could not misunderstand the sense of his words. "I am taking her to live with me because I know that there are those who are trying to tempt her. She is not one to yield, but I do not intend that she should run any risk at their hands." These words were said with even greater significance. "She will stay with me altogether now. She will work here in my office. During the day she will accompany me. She will eat at my table. I shall not be so lonesome at my meals, for her chatter will entertain me." "I suppose she will give you all the satisfaction that you expect?" remarked Talouel suavely. "I suppose so also," replied his employer, very dryly.
Meanwhile, Perrine, leaning with her elbows on the windowsill, looked out dreamily over the beautiful garden, at the factories beyond the village with its houses and church, the meadows in which the silvery water glistened in the oblique rays of the setting sun. And then her eyes turned in the opposite direction, to the woods where she had sat down the day she had come, and where, in the evening breeze, she had seemed to hear the soft voice of her mother murmuring, "I know you will be happy." Her dear mother had foreseen the future, and the big daisies had also spoken true. Yes, she was beginning to be happy. She must be patient, and all would come right in time. She need not hurry matters now. There was no poverty, no hunger or thirst, in this beautiful chateau where she had entered so quickly. When the factory whistle announced the closing hour, she was still standing at her window, deep in thought. The piercing whistle recalled her from the future to the present. Along the white roads between the fields, she saw a black swarm of workers. First a great compact mass, then gradually it grew smaller, as they dwindled off in different directions in groups towards their homes. Old Coco's gentle trot was soon heard on the drive, and Perrine saw her blind grandfather returning to his home. She gave herself a real wash, with eau de cologne as well as soap, a delicious perfume soap. It was not until the clock on the mantel-shelf struck 8 that she went down. She wondered how she would find the dining room. She did not have to look for it, however. A footman in a black coat, who was standing in the hall, showed her the way. Almost immediately, Monsieur Wolfren came in. No one guided him. He seemed to have no difficulty in finding his way to his seat. A bowl of beautiful orchids stood in the middle of the table, which was covered with massive silver and cut glass, which gleamed in the lights that fell from the crystal chandelier. For a moment she stood behind her chair, not knowing what to do. Monsieur Wolfren seemed to sense her attitude. "Sit down," he said. The dinner was served at once. The servant who had shown her the way to the dining room put a plate of soup before her, while Bastien brought another to his master, which was full to the brim. If she had been dining there alone with Monsieur Wolfren, she would have been quite at her ease. But the inquisitive glances the servants cast at her made her feel deeply embarrassed. Probably they were wondering how a little tramp like her would eat. Fortunately, however, she made no mistakes. The dinner was very simple: soup, roast lamb, green peas, and salad. But there was abundance of dessert, 2 or 3 raised stands of delicious fruit and cakes. "Tomorrow, if you like, you may go and see the hothouses where these fruits are grown," said Monsieur Wolfren. Perrine thanked him and said she would like to. She had commenced by helping herself discreetly to some cherries. Monsieur Wolfren wished her also to take some apricots, peaches, and grapes. "Take all you want," he said. "At your age, I should have eaten all the fruit that is on the table, if it had been offered to me." Bastien selected an apricot and peach and placed them before Perrine as he might have done for an intelligent monkey, just to see how the little animal would eat. But despite the delicious fruit, Perrine was very pleased when the dinner came to an end. She hoped that the next day the servants would not stare so much. "Now, you are free until tomorrow," said Monsieur Wolfren, rising from his seat. "It is moonlight, and you can go for a stroll in the garden, or read in the library, or take a book up to your own room." She was embarrassed, wondering if she ought not to tell Monsieur Wolfren that she would do as he wished. While she stood hesitating, she saw Bastien making signs to her which at first she did not understand. He held an imaginary book in one hand and appeared to be turning the pages with the other, then glanced at M. Wolfren and moved his lips as though he were reading. Suddenly, Perrine understood. She was to ask if she might read to him. "But don't you need me, sir?" she said timidly. "Would you not like me to read to you?" Bastien nodded his head in approval. He seemed delighted that she had guessed what he had tried to explain. "Oh, you need some time to yourself," replied M. Wolfren. "I assure you that I am not at all tired," said Perrine. "Very well, then," said the blind man. "Follow me into the study." The library was a big, somber room, separated from the dining room by the hall. There was a strip of carpet laid from one room to the other, which was a guide for the blind man. He now walked direct to the room opposite. Perrine had wondered how he spent his time when he was alone, as he could not read. From the appearance of the room, one could not guess, for the large table was covered with papers and magazines. Before the window stood a large Voltaire chair, upholstered in tapestry. The chair was rather worn. This seemed to indicate that the blind man sat for long hours face to face with the sky, the clouds of which he could never see. "What could you read to me?" he asked Perrine. "A newspaper, if you wish. There are some on the table." "The less time one gives to the newspapers, the better. Do you like books on travels?" "Yes, sir, I do," she said. "I do too," he said. "They amuse one as well as instruct one." Then, as though speaking to himself, as though unaware of her presence, he said softly, "Get away from yourself. Get interested in another life than your own." "We'll read from around the world," he said. He led her to a bookcase which contained several volumes on travels and told her to look in the index. "What shall I look for?" she asked. "Look in the eyes for the word India." Thus he was following his own thoughts. How could he live the life of another? His one thought was of his son. He now wanted to read about the country where his boy lived. "Tell me what you find," he said. She read aloud the various headings concerning India, and he told her which volume to take. As she was about to take it, she stood as though transfixed, gazing at a portrait hanging over the fireplace, which her eyes, gradually becoming accustomed to the dim light, had not seen before. "Why are you silent?" he asked. "I'm looking at the portrait over the mantel-shelf," she said, in a trembling voice. "That was my son when he was 20, said the old gentleman. "But you can't see it very well. I'll light up." He touched the electric knob, and the room was flooded with light. Perrine, who had taken a few steps nearer, uttered a cry and let the book of travels fall to the floor. "What is the matter?" he asked. She did not reply, but stood there, with her eyes fixed on the picture of a fair young man dressed in a hunting suit, leaning with one hand on a gun and the other stroking the head of a black spaniel. There was silence in the room. Then the blind man heard a little sob. "Why are you crying?" he asked. Perrine did not reply for a moment. With an effort, she tried to control her emotion. "It's the picture." "Your son?"
You are his father? She stammered. At first he did not understand. Then in a voice that was strangely sympathetic, he said, And you were thinking of your father, perhaps. Yes, sir, I was. Poor little girl, he murmured.
Chapter 24. Getting an Education. The next morning, when Theodore and Casimir entered their uncle's office to attend to the correspondence, they were amazed to see Perrine installed at her table as though she were a fixture there. Talouel had taken care not to tell them, but he had contrived to be present when they entered so as to witness their discomfiture. The sight of their amazement gave him considerable enjoyment, although he was furious at the way this little beggar girl had imposed, as he thought, upon the senile weakness of an old man. It was at least some compensation to know that the two nephews felt the same astonishment and indignation that he had. Evidently, they did not understand her presence in this sacred office, where they themselves only remained just the time necessary to report on the business of which they were in charge. Theodore and Casimir looked in dismay at one another, but they did not dare ask questions. Talouel left the room the same time as they. "You were surprised to see that girl in the boss's office, eh?" he said when they got outside. They did not deign to reply. "If you had not come in late this morning, I should have let you know that she was there, and then you would not have looked so taken back. She noticed how surprised you were." He had managed to give them 2 little knocks. First, there was a gentle scolding for them being late. Secondly, he had let them see that he, a foreman, had noticed that they had been unable to hide their discomfiture, and that the girl had noticed it too. And they were Monsignor Vauquelin's nephews. Aha! M.C. Vauquelin told me yesterday that he had taken that girl to live at the chateau with him, and that in the future she would work in his office. But who is the girl? That's what I'd like to know. I don't think your uncle knows either. He told me he wanted someone to be with him whom he could trust. Hasn't he got us? Asked Casimir. That is just what I said to him. I mentioned you both, and do you know what he replied? He wanted to pause to give him more effect to his words, but he was afraid that they would turn their backs upon him before he had said what he wanted. "Oh, my nephews," he said, "and what are they?" From the tone in which he said those few words, I thought it better not to reply, continued Talouel. He told me then that he intended to have that girl up at the chateau with him because there was someone trying to tempt her to tell something that she should not tell. He said he knew that she could be trusted, but he said he didn't like others that he could not trust to put the girl in such a position. He said she had already proven to him that she could be trusted. I wonder who he meant had tried to tempt her. I thought it my duty to tell you this, because while Monsieur Edmond is away, you two take his place," added Talouel. He had given them several thrusts, but he wanted to give them one last sharp knock. "Of course, Monsieur Edmond might return at any moment," he said. "I believe that your uncle is on the right track at last. He has been making inquiries, and from the looks of things, I think we shall have him back soon." "What have you heard? Anything?" asked Theodore, who could not restrain his curiosity. "Oh, I keep my eyes open," said Talouel, "and I can tell you that that girl is doing a lot of translating in the way of letters and cables that come from India." At that moment, he looked from a window and saw a telegraph boy strolling up to the office. "Here is another cable coming in," he said. "This is a reply to one that has been sent to Dhaka. It must be very annoying for you not to be able to speak English. You could be the first to announce to the boss that your cousin will be coming back. Now that little tramp will be the one to do it."
Tallulah hurried forward to meet the telegraph boy. "Say, you don't hurry yourself, do you?" he cried. "Do you want me to kill myself?" asked the boy insolently. He hurried with the message to M. Wolfran's office. "Shall I open it, sir?" he asked eagerly. "Yes, do," said M. Wolfran. "Oh, it is in English," replied Tallulah as he looked at the missive. "Then Aurélie must attend to it," said M. Wolfran, and with a wave of his hand dismissed the manager. As soon as the door had closed, Perrine translated the cable. It read, "Friend Lasserre, a French merchant. Last news from Dara, 5 years. Wrote Father Macrinus, according to your wish." 5 years? cried M. Wolfran. Then, as he was not the sort of man to waste time in regrets, he said to Perrine, "Write 2 cables, one to M. Lasserre in French and one to Father Macrinus in English." She quickly wrote the cable that she had to translate into English, but she asked if she could get a dictionary from Bendit's office before she did the one in French. "Are you not sure of your spelling?" asked M. Wolfran. "No, I am not at all sure," she replied, "and I should not like them at the office to make fun of any message that is sent by you." "Then you would not be able to write a letter without making mistakes?" "No, I know I should make a lot of mistakes. I can spell French words all right at the commencement, but the endings I find very difficult. I find it much easier to write in English, and I think I ought to tell you so now." "Have you never been to school?" "No, never. I only know what my father and mother taught me. When we stopped on the roads, they used to make me study, but I never studied very much." "You are a good girl to tell me so. We must see to that. But for the moment, let us attend to what we have on hand."
It was not until the afternoon, when they were driving out, that he again referred to her spelling. "Have you written to your relations yet?" he asked. "No, sir." "Why not?" "Because I would like nothing better than to stay here with you, who are so kind to me," she said. "Then you don't want to leave me?" asked the blind man. "No, I want to help you all I can," said Perrine softly. "Very well. Then you must study so as to be able to act as a little secretary for me. Would you like to be educated?" "Indeed I would, and I will work so hard," said Perrine. "Well, the matter can be arranged without depriving myself of your services," said Monsieur Wolfran. "There is a very good teacher here, and I will ask her to give you lessons from 6 to 8 in the evenings. She is a very nice woman. There are only 2 things against her. They are her height and her name. She is taller than I am, and her shoulders are much broader than mine. Her name is Mademoiselle Belhomme. She is indeed a Belhomme, for although she is only 40, her shoulders and figure are more massive than any man's I know. I must add that she has not a beard." Perrine smiled at this description of the teacher that she was to have. After they had made a tour of the factories, they stopped before a girls' school, and Mademoiselle Belhomme ran out to greet Monsieur Wolfran. He expressed a wish to get down and go into the school and speak with her. Perrine, who followed in their footsteps, was able to examine her. She was indeed a giant, but her manner seemed very womanly and dignified. At times, her manner was almost timid and did not accord at all with her appearance.
Naturally, she could not refuse anything the all-powerful master of Maraucourt asked, but even if she had had any reasons to refuse Monsieur Wolfran's request, the little girl with the beautiful eyes and hair pleased her very much. "Yes," she said to Monsieur Wolfran, "we will make her an educated girl. Do you know she has eyes like a gazelle? I have never seen a gazelle, but I should imagine their great brown eyes are like hers. They are wonderful." The next day, when Monsieur Wolfran returned to his home at the dinner hour, he asked the governess what she thought of her new pupil. Mademoiselle Belhomme was most enthusiastic in her praise of Perrine. "Does she show any intelligence?" asked Monsieur Wolfran. "Why, she is wonderfully intelligent," replied Mademoiselle Belhomme. "It would have been such a calamity if she had remained without an education." Monsieur Villefranche smiled at Mademoiselle Bellhomme's words. "What about her spelling?" he asked. "Oh, that is very poor, but she'll do better. Her writing is fairly good, but of course she needs to study hard. She is so intelligent, it is extraordinary. So as to know exactly what she knew in writing and spelling, I asked her to write me an account of Maraucourt. In 20 to 100 lines, I asked her to describe the village to me. She sat down and wrote. Her pens flew over the paper. She did not hesitate for words. She wrote 4 long pages. She described the factories, the scenery, everything clearly and in detail. She wrote about the birds and the fishes over near the pond, and about the morning mists that cover the fields and the water. Then of the calm, quiet evenings. Had I not seen her writing it, I should have thought that she had copied it from some good author. Unfortunately, the spelling and writing is very poor, but as I said, that does not matter. That is merely a matter of a few months, whilst all the lessons in the world would not teach her how to write if she had not been gifted with the sense of feeling and seeing in such a remarkable manner, that she can convey to others what she feels and sees. If you have time to let me read it to you, you will see that I have not exaggerated."
The governess read Perrine's narrative to him. He was delighted. He had wondered once or twice if he had been wise in so promptly befriending this little girl and giving her a place in his home. It had appeared to him strange, the sudden fancy that he had taken to her. He told Mademoiselle Belhomme how her little pupil had lived in a cabin in one of the fields, and how, with nothing except what she found on hand, she contrived to make kitchen utensils and shoes, and how she had made her meals of the fish, herbs, and fruit that she found. Mademoiselle Belhomme's kind face beamed as the blind man talked. She was greatly interested in what he told her. When Monsieur Villefranche stopped, the governess remained silent, thinking. "Don't you think," she said at last, "that to know how to create the necessities that one needs is a master quality to be desired above all?" "I certainly do, and it was precisely because that child could do that I first took an interest in her. Ask her some time to tell you her story, and you will see that it required some energy and courage for her to arrive where she is now. Well, she has received her rewards, and she has been able to interest you." "Yes, I am interested and already attached to her. I am glad that you like her, and I hope that you will do all that you can with her." Perrine made great progress with her studies. She was interested in everything her governess had to tell her, but her beautiful eyes betrayed the greatest interest when Mademoiselle Belhomme talked of her grandfather. Many times Perrine had spoken of Monsieur Villefranche's illness to Rosalie, but she had only received vague replies to her queries. Now, from her governess, she learned all the details regarding his affliction. Like everyone at Maraucourt, Mademoiselle Belhomme was concerned with Monsieur Villefranche's health, and she had often spoken with Dr. Rouchon, so she was in a position to satisfy Perrine's curiosity better than Rosalie could.
Her grandfather had a double cataract. It was not incurable. If he were operated upon, he might recover his sight. The operation had not yet been attempted because his health would not allow it. He was suffering from bronchial trouble, and if the operation was to be a success, he would have to be in a perfect state of health. But M. Volcran was imprudent. He was not careful enough in following the doctor's orders. How could he remain calm, as Dr. Rouchon recommended, when he was always worked up to a fever of anxiety over the continued absence of his son? So long as he was not sure of his son's fate, there was no chance for the operation, and it was put off. But would it be possible to have it later? That the oculists could not decide. They were uncertain so long as the blind man's health continued in this precarious state. But when Mademoiselle Belhomme saw that Perrine was also anxious to talk about Talouel and the 2 nephews and their hopes regarding the business, she was not so communicative. It was quite natural that the girl should show an interest in her benefactor, but that she should be interested in the village gossip
was not permissible. Certainly, it was not a conversation for a governess and her pupil. It was not with talks of this kind that one should mold the character of a young girl. Perrine would have had to renounce all hope of getting any information from her governess if Casimir's mother, Madame Bretonneau, had not decided to come to the chateau on a visit. This coming visit opened the lips of Mademoiselle Belhomme, which otherwise would certainly have remained closed. As soon as the governess heard that Madame Bretonneau was coming, she had a very serious talk with her little pupil. "My dear child," she said, lowering her voice, "I must give you some advice. I want you to be very reserved with this lady who is coming here tomorrow." "Reserved? About what?" asked Perrine in surprise.
"Monsieur Wilfrin did not only ask me to take charge of your education, but to take a personal interest in you. That is why I give you this advice. Please, mademoiselle, explain to me what I ought to do," said Perrine. "I don't understand at all what this advice means, and I am very nervous." "Although you have not been very long at Maraucourt," said Mademoiselle Belhomme, "you must know that Monsieur Wilfrin's illness and the continued absence of his son is a cause of anxiety to all this part of the country." "Yes, I have heard that," answered Perrine. "What would become of all those employed in the works, 7,000? And all those who are dependent on these 7,000, if Monsieur Wilfrin should die and his son not return? Will he leave his fortune and works to his nephews, of which he has no more confidence in one than the other? Or to one who for 20 years has been his right hand, and who, having managed the works with him, is perhaps more than anyone else in a position to keep his hold on them? When Monsieur Wilfrin took his nephew Theodore into the business, everyone thought that he intended to make him his heir. But later, when Monsieur Casimir left college and his uncles sent for him, they saw that they had made a mistake, and that Monsieur Wilfrin had not decided to leave his business to these two boys. His only wish was to have his son back, for although they had been parted for 10 years, he still loved him. Now, no one knew whether the son was dead or alive, but there were those who wished that he was dead, so that they themselves could take Monsieur Wilfrin's place when he died. Now, my dear child, you understand, you live here in the home of Monsieur Wilfrin, and you must be very discreet in this matter, and not talk about it to Casimir's mother. She is working all she can for her son's interest, and she will push anyone aside who stands in his way. Now, if you were on too good terms with her, you would be on bad terms with Theodore's mother, and the other way about.
Then, on the other hand, should you gain the good graces of both of them, you would perhaps have reason to fear one from another direction. That is why I give you this little advice. Talk as little as possible, and if you are questioned, be careful to make replies as vague as possible. It is better sometimes to be looked upon rather as too stupid than too intelligent. This is so in your case. The less intelligent you appear, the more intelligent you will really be.
Chapter 25. Meddling Relatives. This advice, given with every kindness, did not tend to lessen Perrine's anxiety. She was dreading Madame Bretonneau's visit on the morrow. Her governess had not exaggerated the situation. The two mothers were struggling and scheming in every possible way, each to have her son alone inherit one day or another the great works of Maraucourt and the fortune which it was rumored would be more than 100 million francs. The one, Madame Stanislas Condavois, was the wife of Monsieur Wilfrin's eldest brother, a big linen merchant.
Her husband had not been able to give her the position in society which she believed to be hers, and now she hoped that through her son, inheriting his uncle's great fortune, she would at last be able to take the place in the Parisian world which she knew she could grace. The other, Madame Bretonneau, was Monsieur Wolfran's married sister, who had married a Boulogne merchant, who in turn had been a cement and coal merchant, insurance agent, and maritime agent, but with all his trades had never acquired riches. She wanted her brother's wealth as much for love of the money as to get it away from her sister-in-law, whom she hated. While their brother and his only son had lived on good terms, they had had to content themselves by borrowing all they could from him in loans which they never intended to pay back.
But the day when Edmund had been packed off to India, ostensibly to buy jute, but in reality as a punishment for being too extravagant and getting into debt, the two women had schemed to take advantage of the situation. On each side, they had made every preparation so that each could have her son alone, at any moment, take the place of the exile. In spite of all their endeavors, the uncle had never consented to let the boys live with him at the chateau. There was room enough for them all, and he was sad and lonely, but he had made a firm stand against having them with him in his home. "I don't want any quarrels or jealousy around me," he had always replied to the suggestions made. He had then given Theodore the house he had lived in before he built the chateau, and another to Casimir that had belonged to the late head of the counting house, whom Mumblot had replaced. So their surprise and indignation had been intense when a stranger, a poor girl, almost a child, had been installed in the chateau where they themselves had only been admitted as guests. What did it mean? Who was this little girl? What had they to fear from her? Madame Bretonneau had put these questions to her son, but his replies had not satisfied her. She decided to find out for herself, hence her visit. Very uneasy when she arrived, it was not long before she felt quite at ease again, so well did Perrine play the part that Mademoiselle had advised her. Although Monsieur Wolfran had no wish to have his nephews living with him, he was very hospitable and cordial to their parents when they came to visit him. On these occasions, the beautiful mansion put on its most festive appearance. Fires were lighted everywhere, the servants put on their best liveries, the best carriages and horses were brought from the stables, and in the evening the villagers could see the great chateau lighted up from ground floor to roof. The Victoria, with the coachman and footman, had met Madame Bretonneau at the railway station. Upon her getting out of the carriage, Bastien had been on hand to show her to the apartment, which was also reserved for her on the first floor. Monsieur Wolfran never made any change in his habits when his relations came to Maraucourt. He saw them at meal times, spent the evenings with them, but no more of the time did he give them. With him, business came before everything. His nephew, the son of whichever one happened to be visiting there, came to luncheon and dinner, and remained the evening as late as he wished, but that was all. Monsieur Wolfran spent his hours at the office just the same, and Perrine was always with him, so Madame Bretonneau was not able to follow up her investigations on the little tramp, as she had wished. She had questioned Bastien and the maids. She had made a call on Mother Françoise and had questioned her carefully, also Aunt Zenobie and Rosalie, and she had obtained all the information that they could give her, that is, all they knew from the moment of her arrival in the village until she went to live in the great house as a companion to the millionaire. All this, it seemed, was due exclusively to her knowledge of English. She found it a difficult matter, however, to talk to Perrine alone, who never left Monsieur Wolfran's side unless it was to go to her own room. Madame Bretonneau was in a fever of anxiety to see what was in the girl and discover some reason for her sudden success. At table, Perrine said absolutely nothing. In the morning, she went off with Monsieur Wolfran. After she had finished luncheon, she went at once to her own room. When they returned from the tour of the factories, she went at once to her lessons with her governess. In the evening, upon leaving the table, she went up again to her own room. Madame Bretonneau could not get the girl alone to talk with her. Finally, on the eve of her departure, she decided to go to Perrine's own room. Perrine, who thought that she had got rid of her, was sleeping peacefully.
A few knocks on the door awoke her. She sat up in bed and listened.
Another knock. She got up and went to the door. "Who is there?" she asked, without opening it. "Open the door! It is I, Madame Bretonneau," said a voice. Perrine turned the lock. Madame Bretonneau slipped into the room while Perrine turned on the light. "Get into bed again," said Madame Bretonneau. "We can talk just as well." She took a chair and sat at the foot of the bed so that she was full face with Perrine. "I want to talk with you about my brother," she began. "You have taken William's place, and I want to tell you a few things that you should do. For William, in spite of his faults, was very careful of his master's health. You seem a nice little girl and very willing, and I am sure if you wish you could do as much as William, I assure you that we shall appreciate it." At the first words, Perrine was reassured. If it was only of Monsieur Vaufran's health that she wanted to speak, she had nothing to fear. "I think you are a very intelligent girl," said Madame Bretonneau with a flattering, ingratiating smile. At these words and the look which accompanied them, Perrine's suspicions were aroused at once. "Thank you," she said, exaggerating her simple, childlike smile. "All I ask is to give as good service as William." "Ah, I was sure we could count on you," said Madame Bretonneau. "You have only to say what you wish, madame," said little Perrine, looking up at the intruder with her big, innocent eyes. "First of all, you must be very attentive about his health. You must watch him carefully and see that he does not take cold. A cold might be fateful. He would have pulmonary congestion, and that would aggravate his bronchitis. Do you know if they could cure him of his bronchial trouble? They could operate upon him and give him back his sight. Think what happiness that would be for all of us."
"I also would be happy," replied Perrine. "Those words prove that you are grateful for what he has done for you, but then you are not of the family." Perrine assumed her most innocent air. "Yes, but that does not prevent me from being attached to Monsieur Vaufran," she said. "Believe me, I am." "Of course," answered Madame Bretonneau, "and you can prove your devotion by giving him the care which I am telling you to give him. My brother must not only be protected from catching cold, but he must be guarded against sudden emotions which might, in his state of health, kill him. He is trying to find our dear Edmund, his only son. He is making inquiries in India." She paused, but Perrine made no reply. "I am told," she went on, "that my brother gets you to translate the letters and cables that he receives from India. Well, it is most important that if there be bad news, that my son should be informed first. Then he will send me a telegram, and as it is not far from here to Bologna, I will come at once to comfort my poor brother. The sympathy of a sister is deeper than that of a sister-in-law, you understand." "Certainly, madame, I understand. At least I think so," said Perrine. "Then we can count on you?" Perrine hesitated for a moment, but as she was forced to give a reply, she said, "I shall do all that I can for Monsieur Vaufran." "Yes, and what you do for him will be for us, the same as what you do for us will be for him, and I am going to show you that I am not ungrateful. What would you say if I gave you a very nice dress?" Perrine did not want to say anything, but as she had to make some reply to the question, she put it into a smile. "A very beautiful dress to wear in the evening," said Madame Bretonneau.
"But I am in mourning," answered Perrine. "But being in black does not prevent you from wearing a lovely dress. You are not dressed well enough to dine at my brother's cable. You are very badly dressed up like a clever little dog." Perrine replied that she knew she was not well dressed, but she was somewhat humiliated to be compared with a clever little dog, and the way the comparison was made was an evident intention to lower her. "I took what I could find at Madame Lachaise's shop," she said in self-defense.
It was all right for Madame Lachaise to dress you when you were a little factory girl, but now that it pleases my brother to have you sit at the table with him, we do not wish to blush for you. You must not mind us making fun of you, but you have no idea how you amused us in that dreadful waist you have been wearing." Madame Berthenot smiled as though she could still see Perrine in the hideous waist. "But there," she said brightly, "all that can be remedied. You are a beautiful girl, there is no denying that, and I shall see that you have a dinner dress to set off your beauty and a smart little tailored costume to wear in the carriage. And when you see yourself in it, you will remember who gave it you. I expect your underwear is no better than your waist. Let me see it." Thereupon, with an air of authority, she opened first one drawer, then another, then shut them again disdainfully with a shrug of her shoulders. "I thought so. It's dreadful. Not good enough for you." Perrine felt suffocated. She could not speak. "It's lucky," continued Madame Berthenot, "that I came here, for I intend to look after you." Perrine wanted to refuse everything and tell this woman that she did not wish her to take care of her, but remembered the part she had to play. After all, Madame Berthenot's intentions were most generous. It was her words, her manner, that seemed so hard.
"I'll tell my brother," she continued, "that he must order from a dressmaker at Amiens, whose address I will give him, the dinner dress and the tailor suit which is absolutely necessary, and in addition some good underwear. In fact, a whole outfit. Trust in me, and you shall have some pretty things, and I hope that they'll remind you of me all the time. Now don't forget what I have told you."
Chapter 26. Painful Arguments. After the talk his mother had had with Perrine, Casimir by his looks and manner gave her every opportunity to confide in him. But she had no intention of telling him about the researches that his uncle was having made both in India and in England. True, they had no positive news of the exile, it was all vague and contradictory, but the blind man still hoped on. He left no stone unturned to find his beloved son. Madame Bretonnet's advice had some good effect. Until then, Perrine had not taken the liberty of having the hood of the phaeton pulled up, if she thought the day was chilly, nor had she dared advise Monsieur Villefranc to put on an overcoat, or suggest that he have a scarf around his neck. Neither did she dare close the window in the study if the evening was too cool, but from the moment that Madame Boutonnet had warned her that the damp mists and rain would be bad for him, she put aside all timidity. Now, no matter what the weather was like, she never got into the carriage without looking to see that his overcoat was in its place and a silk scarf in the pocket. If a slight breeze came up, she put the scarf around his neck or helped him into his coat. If a drop of rain began to fall, she stopped at once and put up the hood. When she first walked out with him, she had gone her usual pace, and he had followed without a word of complaint. But now that she realized that a brisk walk hurt him and usually made him cough or breathe with difficulty, she walked slowly. In every way she devised means of going about their usual day's routine so that he should feel the least fatigue possible. Day by day the blind man's affection for little Perrine grew. He was never effusive, but one day while she was carefully attending to his wants, he told her that she was like a little daughter to him. She was touched. She took his hand and kissed it. "Yes," he said, "you are a good girl." Putting his hand on her head, he added, "Even when my son returns, you shall not leave us. He will be grateful to you for what you are to me." "I am so little, and I want to be so much," she said. "I will tell him what you have been," said the blind man, "and besides, he will see for himself, for my son has a good, kind heart." Often he would speak in these terms, and Perrine always wanted to ask him how, if these were his sentiments, he could have been so unforgiving and severe with him. But every time she tried to speak, the words would not come, for her throat was closed with emotion. It was a serious matter for her to broach such a subject. But on that particular evening, she felt encouraged by what had happened. There could not have been a more opportune moment. She was alone with him in his study, where no one came unless summoned. She was seated near him under the lamplight. Ought she to hesitate longer? She thought not. "Do you mind," she said in a little trembling voice, "if I ask you something that I do not understand? I think of it all the time, and yet I have been afraid to speak." "Speak out," he said. "What I cannot understand," she said timidly, "is that, loving your son as you do, you could be parted from him."
"It is because you are so young you do not understand," he said, "that there is duty as well as love. As a father, it was my duty to send him away. That was to teach him a lesson. I had to show him that my will was stronger than his. That is why I sent him to India, where I intended to keep him but a short while. I gave him a position befitting my son and heir. He was the representative of my house. Did I know that he would marry that miserable creature? He was mad." "But Father Field said that she was not a miserable creature," insisted Perrine. "She was, or she would not have contracted a marriage that was not valid in France," retorted the blind man, "and I will not recognize her as my daughter." He said this in a tone that made Perrine feel suddenly cold. Then he continued abruptly, "You wonder why I am trying to get my son back now, if I did not want him back after he had married? Things have changed. Conditions are not the same now as then. After 14 years of this so-called marriage, my son ought to be tired of this woman, and of the miserable life that he has been forced to live on account of her. Besides, conditions for me have also changed. My health is not what it was, and I am blind. I cannot recover my sight unless I am operated upon, and I must be in a calm state favorable to the success of this operation. When my son learns this, do you think he will hesitate to leave this woman? I am willing to support her and her daughter also. I am sure many times he has thought of Maraucourt and wanted to return. If I love him, I know that he also loves me. When he learns the truth, he will come back at once. You will see." "Then he would have to leave his wife and daughter?" "He has no wife, nor has he a daughter," said the old man sternly. "Father Field says that he was married at the mission house by Father Leclerc."
"This marriage was contracted contrary to the French law," said Monsieur Wulfren. "But was it not lawful in India?" asked Perrine. "I will have it annulled in Rome," said the blind man. "But the daughter, the law would not recognize that child." "Is the law everything? What do you mean?" "I mean that it is not the law that makes one love or not love one's parents or children. It was not the law that made me love my poor father. I loved him because he was good and kind, and he loved me. I was happy when he kissed me and smiled at me. I loved him, and there was nothing that I liked better than to be with him. He loved me because I was his little girl and needed his affection. He loved me because he knew that I loved him with all my heart. The law had nothing to do with that. I did not ask if it was the law that made him my father. It was our love that made us so much to each other." "What are you driving at?" asked Monsieur Wulfren. "I beg your pardon if I have said anything I should not say, but I speak as I think and as I feel. And that is why I am listening to you," said the blind man. "What you say is not quite reasonable, but you speak as a good girl would." "Well, sir, what I am trying to say is this," said Perrine boldly. "If you love your son and want to have him back with you, he also loves his daughter and wants to have her with him."
"He should not hesitate between his father and his daughter," said the old man. "Besides, if the marriage is annulled, she will be nothing to him. He could soon marry that woman off again with the dowry that I would give her. Everything is changed since he went away. My fortune is much larger. He will have riches, honor, and position. Surely it isn't a little half-caste that can keep him back." "Perhaps she is not so dreadful as you imagine," said Perrine.
A Hindu. In the books that I read to you, it says that the Hindus are more beautiful than the Europeans, said Perrine. Travelers' exaggerations, said the old man scoffingly. They have graceful figures, faces of pure oval, deep eyes with a proud look. They are patient, courageous, industrious. They are studious. You have a memory. One should always remember what one reads, should not one? Asked Perrine. It does not seem that the Hindu is such a horrible creature as you say. Well, what does all that matter to me, as I do not know her? But if you knew her, you might perhaps get interested in her and learn to love her. Never. I can't bear to think of her and her mother. But if you knew her, you might not feel so angry towards her. He clenched his fist as though unable to control his fury, but he did not stop her. I don't suppose that she is at all like you suppose, said Perrine. Father Fields is a good priest, and he would not say what was not true. And he says that her mother was good and kind and a lady. He never knew her. It is hearsay. But it seems that everyone holds this opinion. If she came to your house, would you not be as kind to her as you have been to me, a stranger? Don't say anything against yourself. I do not speak for or against myself, but what I ask for is justice. I know if that daughter, your granddaughter, came here, she would love you with all her heart. She clasped her hands together and looked up at him as though she could see her. Her voice shook with emotion. Wouldn't you like to be loved by your granddaughter? She asked pleadingly. The blind man rose impatiently. I tell you, she can never be anything to me, he cried. I hate her as I hate her mother. The woman took my son from me, and she keeps him from me. If she had not bewitched him, he would have been back long before this. She has been everything to him, while I, his father, have been nothing. He strode back and forth, carried away with his anger. She had never seen him like this. Suddenly he stopped before her. Go to your room, he said almost harshly, and never speak of those creatures to me again. Besides, what right have you to mix up in this? Who told you to speak to me in such a manner? For a moment she was dumbfounded. Then she said, Oh, no one, sir, I assure you. I just put myself into your little granddaughter's place. That is all. He softened somewhat, but he continued still in a severe voice. In the future, do not speak on this subject. You see it as painful for me, and you must not annoy me. I beg your pardon, she said, her voice full of tears. Certainly, I ought not to have spoken so.
Chapter 27. The Blind Man's Grief. Monsieur Wolfron advertised in the principal newspapers of Calcutta, Dhaka, Bombay, and London for his son. He offered a reward of £40 to anyone who could furnish any information, however slight it might be, about Edmund Pendevoine. The information must, however, be authentic. Not wishing to give his own address, which might have brought to him all sorts of correspondence, more or less dishonest, he put the matter into the hands of his banker at Amiens. Numerous letters were received, but very few were serious. The greater number came from detectives who guaranteed to find the person they were searching for if the expenses for the first steps necessary could be sent them. Other letters promised everything without any foundation whatever upon which they based their promises. Others related events that had occurred 5, 10, 12 years previous. No one kept to the time stated in the advertisement. That was the last 3 years. Perrine read or translated all these letters for the blind man. He would not be discouraged at the meager indications sent him. It is only by continued advertising that we shall get results, he said always. Then again he advertised. Finally, one day a letter from Bosnia gave them some information which might lead to something. It was written in bad English and stated that if the advertiser would place the £40 promised with a banker at Sarajevo, the writer would furnish authentic information concerning Monsieur Edmond Pendevoine, going back to the month of November of the preceding year. If this proposition was acceptable, the reply was to be sent to N917, General Delivery, Sarajevo. This letter seemed to give Monsieur Wolfran so much relief and joy that it was a confession of what his fears had been. For the first time since he had commenced his investigations, he spoke of his son to his 2 nephews and Tallowell.
"I am delighted to tell you that at last I have news of my son," he said. "He was in Bosnia last November." There was great excitement as the news was spread through the various towns and villages. As usual under such circumstances, it was exaggerated. "Monsieur Edmond is coming back. He'll be home shortly," went from one to another. "It's not possible," cried some. "If you don't believe it," they were told, "you've only to look at Towell's face and Monsieur Wolfran's nephews." Yet there were some who would not believe that the exile would return. The old man had been too hard on him. He had not deserved to be sent away to India because he had made a few debts. His own family had cast him aside, so he had a little family of his own out in India. Why should he come back? And then, even if he was in Bosnia or Turkey, that was not to say that he was on his way to Maraucourt. Coming from India to France, why should he have to go to Bosnia? It was not on the route. This remark came from Bennett, who, with his English cool-headedness, looked at things only from a practical standpoint, in which sentiment played no part. He thought that just because everyone wished for the son and heir to return, it was not enough to bring him back. The French could wish a thing and believe it. But he was English, he was, and he would not believe that he was coming back until he saw him there with his own eyes. Day by day, the blind man grew more impatient to see his son. Perrine could not bear to hear him talk of his return as a certainty. Many times she tried to tell him that he might be disappointed. One day, when she could bear it no longer, she begged him in her sweet voice not to count too much upon seeing his son, for fear something might still keep him away. The blind man asked her what she meant. "It's so terrible to hear the worst when one has been expecting the best," she said brokenly.
If I say this, it is because that is just what happened to me. We had thought and hoped so much when my father was ill that he would get better, but we lost him, and poor Mama and I did not know how to bear it. We would not think that he might die. Ah, but my boy is alive, and he will be here soon. He will come back to me very soon," said the old man in a firm voice. The next day, the banker from Amiens called at the factory. He was met at the steps by Tallowell, who did all in his power to get the first information which he knew the banker was bringing. At first, his attitude was very obsequious, but when he saw that his advances were repulsed and that the visitor insisted upon seeing his employer at once, he pointed rudely in the direction of M. Wolfran's office and said, "You will find him over there in that room," and then turned and went off with his hands in his pockets. The banker knocked on the door indicated. "Come in," called out M. Wolfran in answer to his knock. "What? You? You at Maraucourt?" he exclaimed when he saw his visitor. "Yes, I had some business to attend to at Pignini, and I came on here to bring you some news received from Bosnia." Perrine sat at her little table. She had gone very white. She seemed like one struck dumb. "Well," asked M. Wolfran. "It is not what you hoped, what we all hoped," said the banker quietly. "You mean that that fellow who wrote just wanted to get a hold of the £40?
"Oh, no, he seems an honest man." "Then he knows nothing." "He does, but unfortunately, his information is only too true." "Unfortunately," gasped the blind man. This was the first word of doubt that he had uttered. "You mean," he added, "that they have no more news of him since last November?" "There is no news since then. The French consul at Sarajevo, Bosnia, has sent me this information."
Last November, your son arrived at Sarajevo, practicing the trade of a strolling photographer. "What do you mean?" exclaimed Monsieur Wolfran. "A strolling photographer? My son." "He had a wagon, a sort of caravan in which he traveled with his wife and child. He used to take pictures on the market squares where they stopped." The banker paused and glanced at some papers he held in his hand. "Oh, you have something to read, haven't you?" said the blind man as he heard the paper rustle. "Read, it will be quicker." "He plied the trade of a photographer," continued the banker, consulting his notes, "and at the beginning of November he left Sarajevo for Travnik, where he fell ill. He became very ill." "Oh, my God!" cried the blind man. "Oh, God!" Monsieur Wolfran had clasped his hands. He was trembling from head to foot, as though a vision of his son was standing before him. "You must have courage," said the banker, gently. "You need all your courage. Your son—" "He is dead," said the blind man. "That is only too true," replied the banker. "All the papers are authentic. I did not want to have any doubt upon the matter, and that was why I cabled to our consul at Sarajevo. Here is his reply. It leaves no doubt." But the old man did not appear to be listening. He sat huddled up in his big chair, his head drooped forward on his chest. He gave no sign of life. Perrine, terrified, wondered if he were dead. Then suddenly he pulled himself together, and the tears began to run down his wrinkled cheeks. He brushed them aside quickly and touched the electric bell which communicated with Tallowell's and his nephew's offices. The call was so imperative that they all ran to the office together. "Are you there?" asked the blind man. "Tallowell, Theodore, and Casimir." All three replied together.
"I have just learned of the death of my son," said their employer. "Stop work in all the factories immediately. Tomorrow, the funeral services will be held in the churches at Maraucourt, Saint-Pipoy, and all the other villages." "Oh, uncle!" cried both the nephews. He stopped them with uplifted hand. "I wish to be alone. Leave me," was all he said. Everyone left the room but Perrine. She alone remained. "Aurélie, are you there?" asked the blind man. She replied with a sob. "Let us go home," he said. As was his habit, he placed his hand on her shoulder, and it was like this that they passed through the crowd of workers who streamed from the factory. As they stood aside for him to pass, all who saw him wondered if he would survive this blow. He who usually walked so upright was bent like a tree that the storm has broken. Could he survive this shock? Perrine asked herself this question with even greater agony, for it was she, and she alone, who knew how his great frame was trembling. His shaking hands grasped her shoulder convulsively, and without him uttering one word, little Perrine knew how deeply her grandfather was smitten. After she had guided him into his study, he sent her away. "Explain why I wish to be left alone. No one is to come in here. No one is to speak to me." "And I refused to believe you," he murmured as she was leaving him. "Oh, please, if you will let me—" "Leave me," he said roughly. Perrine closed the door softly.
Chapter 28. An unrespected funeral. There was considerable bustle and excitement at the chateau all that evening. First, Monsieur and Madame Stanislas Pendevoine, who had received a telegram from Theodore, arrived. Then Monsieur and Madame Bretonneau, sent for by Casimir, came. After that came Madame Bretonneau's 2 daughters, their husbands and children. No one wished to miss the funeral service for poor dear Edmond. Besides, this was the decisive moment for clever maneuvering. What a disaster if this big industry should fall into the hands of one so incapable as Theodore! What a misfortune if Casimir took charge! Neither side thought that a partnership could be possible, and the 2 cousins share alike. Each wanted all for himself. Both Madame Bretonneau and Madame Pendevoine had ignored Perrine since their arrival. They had given her to understand that they did not require her services any longer. She sat in her room hoping that Monsieur Valcrin would send for her so that she could help him into the church, as she had done every Sunday since William had gone. But she waited in vain. When the bells, which had been tolling since the evening before, announced Mass, she saw him get up in his carriage leaning on his brother's arm, while his sister and sister-in-law, with the members of their families, took their places in other carriages. She had no time to lose, for she had to walk. She hurried off. After she had left the house over which death had spread its shroud, she was surprised to notice as she hastened through the village that the taverns had taken on their Sunday air. The men drank and laughed, and the women chatted at their doors, while the children played in the street. Perrine wondered if none of them were going to attend the service.
Upon entering the church, where she had been afraid that she would not find room, she saw that it was almost empty. The bereaved family sat in the choir. Here and there was some village authority, a tradesman, and the heads of the factories. Very few of the working men and women were present. They had not thought to come and join their prayers to those of their employer. Perrine took a seat beside Rosalie and her grandmother, who was in deep mourning. "Alas, my poor little," murmured the old nurse, wiping her eyes. "What did Monsieur Valfran say?" But Perrine was too overcome to reply. The services commenced. As she left the church, Mademoiselle Belhomme came up to her and, like Françoise, wanted to question her about Monsieur Valfran. Perrine told her that he had not spoken to her since the evening before. "As I saw him kneeling there so crushed and broken for the first time, I was pleased that he was blind," said the governess sadly. "Why?" asked Perrine. "Because he could not see how few people came to the church. What indifference his men have shown. If he could have seen that empty church, it would have added to his grief." "I think he must have known how few there were there," said Perrine. "His ears take the place of his eyes, and that empty silence could not deceive him." "Poor man," murmured Mademoiselle Belhomme. "And yet—" She paused. Then, as she was not in the habit of holding anything back, she went on, "And yet it will be a great lesson to him. You know, my child, you cannot expect others to share your sorrows if you are not willing to share theirs."
Monsieur Valfran gives his men what he considers their due, she continued in a lower voice. He is just, but that is all. He has never been a father to his men. He is all for business, business only. What a lot of good he could have done, however, not only here, but everywhere if he had wished, by setting an example. Had he been more to his men, you may be sure that the church would not have been as empty as it was today. Perhaps that was true, but how it hurt Perrine to hear this from the lips of her governess, of whom she was so fond. If anyone else had said so, she might not have felt it so deeply. Yes, undoubtedly it was too true. They had been walking as they talked, and had now reached the schools where Mademoiselle Belhomme lived. "Come in, and we'll have luncheon together," she said. She was thinking that her pupil would not be allowed to take her accustomed place at the family table. "Oh, thank you, but Monsieur Valfran might need me." "Well, in that case you had better go back," said Mademoiselle Belhomme.
When she reached the chateau, she saw that Monsieur Vaufran had no need of her, that he was not even thinking of her. Bastien, whom she met on the stairs, told her that when he came back from the church, he had gone to his own room and locked himself in, forbidding anyone to enter. "He won't even sit down on a day like this with his family," said Bastien, "and they are all going after luncheon. I don't think he even wants to say goodbye to them. Lord help us. What will become of us? Oh, poor master." "What can I do?" asked Perrine. "You can do a great deal. The master believes in you, and he's mighty fond of you." "Mighty fond of me?" echoed Perrine.
"Yes, and it's I as says it," said the butler. "He likes you a whole lot." As Bastien had said, all the family left after luncheon. Perrine stayed in her room, but Monsieur Vaufran did not send for her. Just before she went to bed, Bastien came to tell her that his master wished her to accompany him the next morning at the usual hour. "He wants to get back to work, but will he be able?" said the old butler. "It will be better for him if he can. Work means life for him." The next day, at the usual hour, Perrine was waiting for Monsieur Vaufran. With bent back, he came forward, guided by Bastien. The butler made a sign to her that his master had passed a bad night. "Is Aurélie there?" asked the blind man, in a changed voice, a voice low and weak, like that of a sick child. Perrine went forward quickly. "I am here, Monsieur Vaufran," she said. "Let us get into the carriage, Aurélie," he said. As soon as he had taken his place beside Perrine, his head drooped on his chest. He said not a word. At the foot of the office steps, Talouel was there, ready to receive him and help him to alight. "I suppose you felt strong enough to come," he said in a sympathetic voice which contrasted with the flash in his eyes. "I did not feel at all strong, but I came because I thought that I ought to come," said his employer. "That is what I meant. Monsieur Vaufran stopped him and told Perrine to guide him to his office. The mail, which had accumulated in 2 days, was read, but the blind man made no comments on the correspondence. It was as though he were deaf or asleep. The heads of the factory then came in to discuss an important question that had to be settled that day. When the immediate business was settled, Perrine was left alone with the blind man. He was silent.
Time passed. He did not move. She had often seen him sit still, but on such occasions, from the expression on his face, she had known that he was following his work as though he were watching with his eyes. He listened to the whistle of the engines, the rolling of the trucks. He was attentive to every sound and seemed to know exactly what was going on. But now he seemed as though he were turned into a statue. There was no expression in his face, and he was so silent. He did not seem to be breathing. Perrine was overcome by a sort of terror. She moved uneasily in her chair. She did not dare speak to him. Suddenly he put his 2 hands over his face, and as though unaware that anyone was present, he cried, my God, you have forsaken me! Oh, Lord, what have I done that you should forsake me?" Then the heavy silence fell again. Perrine trembled when she heard his cry, although she could not grasp the depth of his despair. Everything that this man had attempted had been a success. He had triumphed over his rivals, but now, with one blow, that which he wanted most had been snatched from him. He had been waiting for his son, their meeting after so many years of absence. He had pictured to himself, and then what? "My God," cried the blind man again, "why have you taken him from me?"
Chapter 29. The Angel of Reform. As the days passed, M. Vaufran became very weak. At last he was confined to his room with a serious attack of bronchitis, and the entire management of the works was given over to Talouel, who was triumphant. When he recovered, he was in such a state of apathy that it was alarming. They could not rouse him. nothing seemed to interest him, not even his business. Previously, they had feared the effect a shock would have on his system, but now the doctors desired it, for it seemed that only a great shock could drag him out of this terrible condition. What could they do? After a time, he returned to his business, but he scarcely took account of what Talouel had done during his absence. His manager, however, had been too clever and shrewd to take any steps that his employer would not have taken himself. Every day, Perrine took him to his various factories, but the drives were made in silence now. Frequently, he did not reply to the remarks she made from time to time, and when he reached the works, he scarcely listened to what his men had to say. "Do what you think best," he said always. "Arrange the matter with Talouel." How long would this apathy last? After time, when old Coco was bringing them back to Maraucourt, they heard a bell ringing. "Stop," he said. "I think that's the fire alarm." Perrine stopped the horse. "Yes, it's a fire," he said, listening. "Do you see anything?" "I can see a lot of black smoke over by the poplars on the left," replied Perrine. "On the left? That is the way to the factory." "Yes, shall I drive that way?" asked Perrine. "Yes," replied M'Wulfren indifferently. It was not until they reached the village that they knew where the fire was. "Don't hurry, Monsieur Wulfren," called out a peasant. "The fire ain't in your house. It's La Tibour's house that's on fire." La Tibour's was a drunken creature who minded little babies who were too young to be taken to the crèche. She lived in a miserable tumble-down house near the schools. "Let us go there," said Monsieur Wulfren. They had only to follow the crowd, for the people, when they saw the flames and smoke rising, were running excitedly to the spot where the fire was. Before reaching the scene, Perrine had to stop several times for fear of running someone down. Nothing in the world would have made the people get out of their way. Finally, Monsieur Wulfren got out of the carriage and, guided by Perrine, walked through the crowd. As they neared the entrance to the house, Fabry, wearing a helmet, for he was chief of the firemen, came up to them. "We've got it under control," he said, "but the house is entirely burnt, and what's worse, several children, 5 or 6 perhaps, are lost. One is buried beneath, 2 have been suffocated, and we don't know where the other 3 are." "How did it happen?" asked Monsieur Wulfren. "La Tibour's was asleep, drunk. She is still in that condition. The biggest of the children were playing with the matches. When the fire began to flare up, some of the children got out, and La Tibour's woke up. She is so drunk, she got out herself but left the little ones in the cradle. The sound of cries and loud talking could be heard in the yard. Monsieur Wulfren wanted to go in. 'Don't go in there, sir,' said Fabry. 'The mothers whose 2 children were suffocated are carrying on pretty badly.' 'Who are they?' 'Two women who work in your factory. I must speak to them.'
Leaning on Perrine's shoulder, he told her to guide him. Preceded by Fabry, who made way for them, they went into the yard where the firemen were turning the hose on the house as the flames burst forth in a crackling sound. In a far-off corner, several women stood round the 2 mothers who were crying. Fabry brushed aside the group. Monsieur Wulfren went up to the bereaved parents, who sat with their dead children on their knees. Then one of the women, who thought perhaps that a supreme help had come, looked up with a gleam of hope in her eyes. When she recognized Monsieur Wulfren, she raised her arm to him threateningly. "Ah," she cried, "come and see for yourself what they do to our babies while we are sweating and killing ourselves for you. Can you give us back their lives? Oh, my little boy!" She burst into sobs as she bent over her child. Monsieur Wulfren hesitated for a moment, then he turned to Fabry and said, "You are right, let us go." They returned to the offices.
After a time, Taluel came to tell his employer that out of the 6 children that they had thought were dead, 3 had been found in the homes of neighbors, where they had been carried when the fire first broke out. The burial for the other 3 tiny victims was to take place the next day. When Taluel had gone, Perrine, who had been very thoughtful, decided to speak to Monsieur Wolfren. "Are you not going to the burial service of these little babies?" she asked. Her trembling voice betrayed her emotion. "Why should I go?" asked Monsieur Wolfren. "Because that would be the most dignified answer you could give to what that poor woman said. Did my work people come to the burial service of my son?" asked Monsieur Wolfren coldly. "They did not share your sorrow," said Perrine gravely, "but if you share theirs now, they will be touched. You don't know how ungrateful the working man is."
Ungrateful? For what? The money they receive? They consider that they have a right to the money they earn. It is theirs. Would they show ingratitude if an interest was taken in them? If a little friendly help was given them? Perhaps it would not be the same. Do you think so? Friendship creates friendship. One often loves when one knows one is loved. And it seems to me that when we are friendly to others, we make friends ourselves. It means so much to lighten the burdens of the poor, but how much more is it to lighten their sorrows by helping to share them? It seemed to her that she had still so much to say on this subject, but Monsieur Wolfren did not reply. He did not even appear to be listening to her, and she was afraid to say more. Later, she might make another attempt. As they left the office, Monsieur Wolfren turned to Taluel, who was standing on the steps, and said, "Tell the priest to arrange a suitable burial for the 3 children. It will be at my expense, and I shall be there." Taluel jumped. "And let everyone know that all who wish to go to the church tomorrow can take the time off. This fire is a great misfortune." "We are not responsible for it," said Taluel. "Not directly, no," said Monsieur Wolfren. Perrine had another surprise the next morning. After the mail had been opened and the replies dictated, Monsieur Wolfren detained Fabre and said, "I want you to start for Rouen. I think you can spare the time. I have heard that they have built a model crèche there. It is not built by the town, but someone has had it built to the memory of one whom they have lost. I want you to see how this is made. Study it in all its details, the construction, heating, ventilation, and the expense of keeping it up. In 3 months, we must have a crèche at the entrance of all my factories. I don't want such a calamity as that which occurred yesterday to take place again. I rely upon you, and the responsibility is on you now."
That evening, Perrine told the great news to her governess, who was delighted. While they were talking about it, Monsieur Wolfren came into the room. "Mademoiselle," he said, "I have come to ask a favor of you in the name of all the village. It is a big favor. It may mean a great sacrifice on your part. This is it." In a few words, he outlined the request he had to make. It was that Mademoiselle should send in her resignation at the schools and take charge of the 5 crèches which he was going to build. He knew of no one who was capable of taking on their shoulders such a big burden. He would donate a crèche to each village and endow it with sufficient capital to keep up its maintenance. Although Mademoiselle Belhomme loved to teach, and it would be indeed a sacrifice for her to give up her school, she felt, after she had talked with the blind man, that it was here where her duty lay. It was indeed a great work that she was called upon to do, and she would enter upon her task with all the enthusiasm of which her big heart was capable. "This is a great thing you're doing, Monsieur Wolfren," she said, with tears in her eyes, "and I will do all I can to make this work a success. It is your pupil one must thank for it, not I. Her words and suggestions have awakened something in my heart. I have stepped out on a new road. I am only at the first steps. It is nothing compared with what I intend to do." "Oh, please," said Perrine, her eyes bright with delight and pride. "If you still want to do something—" "What is it?" he asked with a smile. What do you mean? Where do you want to take me? Asked the blind man, mystified.
To a place where your presence only for a few moments will bring about extraordinary results, said Perrine. Well, can't you tell me where this mysterious place is? Asked M. Wolfram. But if I tell you, your visit will not have the same effect. It will be a failure. It will be a fine evening and warm, and I am sure that you will not take cold. Please say you will go.
I think one could have confidence in her, said Mademoiselle Bellhomme, although her request seems a little strange and childish. Well, said M. Wolfram indulgently, I'll do as you wish, Aurélie. Now, at what hour are we to start on this adventure? The later it is, the better it will be, said Perrine. During the evening, he spoke several times of the outing they were to have, but Perrine did not explain. Do you know, little girl, you have aroused my curiosity, he said at last. I'm glad you are interested, she said gravely. There is so much that can be done in the future. Do not look back to the past any more. The future is empty for me, said the blind man bitterly. Oh, no, it is not, said Perrine, lifting her lovely face to his. Her eyes were shining with a beautiful light. It will not be empty if you think of others. When one is a child and not very happy, one often thinks that if a wonderful fairy came to them, of what beautiful things they would ask. But if one is the fairy, or rather the magician oneself, and can do all the wonderful things alone, wouldn't it be splendid to use one's power? The evening passed. Several times the blind man asked if it were not time to start, but Perrine delayed as long as possible. At last she said that she thought they could start. The night was warm, no breeze, no mists. The atmosphere was a trifle heavy, and the sky dark.
When they reached the village, it was all quiet. All seemed to sleep. Not a light shone from the windows. The dark night made no difference to the blind man. As they walked along the road from the chateau, he knew exactly where he was. We must be nearing Françoise's house, he said, after they had walked a little distance. That is just where we are going, said Perrine. We are there now. Let me take your hand and guide you, and please don't speak. We have some stairs to go up, but they are quite easy and straight. When we get to the top of these stairs, I shall open a door, and we shall go into a room for just one moment. What do you want me to see when I can't see anything? He said. There will be no need for you to see, replied Perrine. Then why come? I want you here, said Perrine earnestly. Here are the stairs. Now step up, please. They climbed up the stairs, and Perrine opened a door and gently drew Monsieur Vouffran inside a room and closed the door again. They stood in a suffocating, evil-smelling room. Who is there? Asked a weary voice. Pressing his hand, Perrine warned Monsieur Vouffran not to speak. The same voice spoke. Get into bed, La Noyelle. How late you are. This time, Monsieur Vouffran clasped Perrine's hand in a sign for them to leave the place. She opened the door and they went down, while a murmur of voices accompanied them. When they reached the street, Monsieur Vouffran spoke. You wanted me to know what that room was the first night when you slept there?
I wanted you to know what kind of a place all the women who work for you have to sleep in. They are all alike in Maraucourt and the other villages. You have stood in one of these dreadful rooms. All the others are like it. Think of your women and children, your factory hands who are breathing that poisoned air. They are slowly dying. They are almost all weak and sick. Monsieur Vouffran was silent. He did not speak again. Neither did Perrine. When they entered the hall, he bade her good night, and guided by Bastien, he went to his own room.
Chapter 30. Grandfather finds Perrine. 1 year had passed since Perrine had arrived at Maraucourt on that radiant Sunday morning. What a miserable, lonely little girl she had been then. The day was just as radiant now, but what a change in Perrine, and, be it said, in the whole village also. She was now a lovely girl of 15. She knew she was loved and loved for herself, and this is what gave the deep look of happiness to her eyes. And the village, no one would have recognized it now. There were new buildings, pretty cottages, and a hospital commanding a view of the surrounding country. Near the factories were 2 handsome red brick buildings. These were the creches where the little children whose mothers were working in the factories were kept. All the little children had their meals there, and many of them slept there. It was a home for them. M. Wolfrin had bought up all the old houses, the tumble-down hovels and huts, and had built new cottages in their places. There was a large restaurant built where the men and women could get a dinner for 11 cents, the meal consisting of a soup, stew, or roast, bread, and cider. Every little cottage, for which the tenant paid 100 francs a year, had its own tiny garden in which to grow vegetables for the family. In the road leading to the chateau, there was now a fine recreation ground, which was greatly patronized after the factories had closed. There were merry-go-rounds, swings, bowling alleys, and a stand for the musicians who played every Saturday and Sunday, and of course on every holiday. This public park of amusement was used by the people of all 5 villages. Monsieur Wolfrin had thought it better to have one place of reunion and recreation. If his people all met together to enjoy their leisure hours, it would establish good relations and a bond of friendship between them. At the end of the grounds, there was a fine library with a reading and writing room. Monsieur Wolfrin's relations thought that he had gone mad. Did he intend to ruin himself? That is to say, ruin them. Some steps ought to be taken to prevent him from spending his fortune in this manner. His fondness for that girl was a proof that he was losing his mind. That girl did not know what she was doing. All their animosity was centered on her. What did it matter to her that his fortune was being thrown away? But if Perrine had all the relations against her, she knew that she had Monsieur Wolfrin's friendship, and the family doctor, Dr. Rouchon, Mademoiselle Belhomme, and Fabry all adored her. Since the doctor had seen that it was the little girl who had been the means of his patient exerting this wonderful moral and intellectual energy, his attitude to her expressed the greatest respect and affection. In the doctor's eyes, Perrine was a wonderful little girl. "She can do a great deal more than I can," he said, shaking his gray head. And Mademoiselle Belhomme, how proud she was of her pupil! As to Fabry, he was on the best of terms with her. He had been so closely connected with her in the good work that had been done, for Fabry had superintended everything. It was 12:30. Fabry had not yet arrived. Monsieur Wolfrin, usually so calm, was getting impatient. Luncheon was over, and he had gone into his study with Perrine. Every now and again, he walked to the window and listened. "The train must be late," he murmured. Perrine wanted to keep him away from the window, for there were many things going on outside in the park about which she did not wish him to know. With unusual activity, the gardeners were putting great pots of flowers on the steps and in front of the house. Flags were flying from the recreation grounds, which could be seen from the windows. At last, the wheels of a carriage were heard on the drive. "There's Fabry," said Monsieur Wolfrin. His voice expressed anxiety, but pleasure at the same time. Fabry came in quickly. He also appeared to be in a somewhat excited state. He gave a look at Perrine which made her feel uneasy without knowing why. "I got your telegram," said Monsieur Wolfrin, "but it was so vague. I want to be sure. Speak out." "Are you thinking of the man who is superintending sentences?" "Shall I speak before, mademoiselle?" asked Fabry, glancing at Perrine. "Yes, if it is as you say."
It was the first time that Fabry had asked if he could speak before Perrine, and the state of mind in which she was suddenly thrown, this precaution only made her the more anxious. "The person whom we had lost trace of," said Fabry, without looking at Perrine, "came on to Paris. There she died. Here is a copy of the death certificate. It is in the name of Marie Dorisani, widow of Edmond Wolfran Paindevon." With trembling hands, the blind man took the paper.
"Shall I read it to you?" asked Fabry. "No. If you have verified the names, we will attend to that later. Go on." "I not only got the certificate, I wanted to question the man whom they call Grain of Salt. She died in a room in his house. Then I saw all those who were present at the poor woman's funeral. There was a street singer called the Baroness and an old shoemaker called Carp. It was the miserable existence which she had been forced to live that had finally killed her. I even saw the doctor who attended her, Dr. Cendrier. He wanted her to go to the hospital, but she would not be parted from her daughter. Finally, to complete my investigations, they sent me to a woman who buys rags and bones. Her name is Maraucourt. I could not see her until yesterday, as she had been out in the country." Fabry paused. Then, for the first time, he turned to Perrine and bowed respectfully. "I saw Polycare, mademoiselle. He is looking very well." Perrine had risen to her feet. For some moments she stood listening, dazed. Then her eyes filled with tears. "I then had to find out what had become of the little daughter," continued Fabry. "This rag-picker told me that she had met her in the Chantilly woods and that she was dying of hunger. It was her own donkey that she sold to the rag-picker who found her." "Tell me," cried Monsieur Wolfran, turning his sightless eyes towards Perrine, who was trembling from head to foot, "why this little girl did not say who she was. You understand how deeply a little girl can feel, so can you explain this?" Perrine took a few steps towards him. "Tell me why she does not come into my arms, her grandfather's arms." "Oh, grandpapa!" cried Perrine, throwing her arms about his neck.
Chapter 31. The Grateful People. Fabry had left the room, leaving the grandfather and his granddaughter together. For a long time the old man and the girl sat with their arms about each other. They only spoke now and again, just to exchange a word of affection. "My little granddaughter, my boy's little girl," murmured the blind man, stroking her curls. "My grandpapa," murmured Perrine, rubbing her soft cheek against his. "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" he asked at last. "But didn't I try several times?" replied Perrine. "Do you remember what you said to me the last time I spoke of dear mother and myself? You said, 'Understand, never speak to me again of those wretched creatures.' But could I guess that you were my granddaughter?" he said. "If I had come straight to you, don't you think you would have driven me away and not have listened to me?" asked Perrine. "Ah," said the blind man sadly, "who knows what I would have done?" "I thought so," said Perrine, "and I thought it best not to let you know me until, like Mamma said, you would get to love me. And you have waited so long, and you had so many proofs of my affection. But was it the affection of a grandfather? I did not dare think so. When I began to suspect that you were my son's child, I then quickly got positive proofs, and I gave you every chance to tell me that you were. Finally, I employed Fabry, who, with his investigations, forced you to throw yourself into my arms. If you had spoken sooner, my little darling, you would have spared me many doubts." "Yes," said Perrine sweetly, "but we are so happy now. And doesn't that prove that what I did was all for the best?"
Well, all is well. We will leave it at that. Now tell me all about your father, my boy. I cannot speak to you of my father without speaking of my mother. said Perrine gravely. "They both loved me so much, and I loved them just the same." "My little girl," said the blind man. "What Fabrie has just told me of her has touched me deeply. She refused to go to the hospital where she might have been cured because she would not leave you alone in Paris." "Oh, yes, you would have loved her," cried Perrine. "My darling mother." "Talk to me about her," said the old man. "About them both." "Yes," said Perrine. "I will make you know her, and then you will love her." Perrine told about their life before they lost all their money, then about their travels through the various countries and the wanderings over the mountains, then of her father's illness and his death, and how she and her sick mother journeyed through France with the hope that they could reach Maraucourt in time before the sick woman died. While they were talking, they could hear vague sounds outside in the garden. "What is the matter out there?" asked Monsieur Villefranche. Perrine went to the window. The lawns and drive were black with a crowd of men, women, and children. They were dressed in their Sunday clothes. Many of them carried banners and flags. This crowd, between 6,000 and 7,000 people, reached outside the grounds to the public park, and the murmur of their voices had reached the ears of the blind man and had turned his attention from Perrine's story, great though it was. "What is it?" he asked. "It is your birthday today," said Perrine, smiling, "and all your men are here to celebrate it and to thank you for all you have done for them and their families." "Oh!" The blind man walked to the window as though he could see them. He was recognized, and a murmur ran through the crowd. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "how terrible they would be if they were against us." For the first time, he realized the strength of the masses which he controlled. "Yes," said Perrine, "but they are with us because we are with them." "Yes, little girl, and it is all due to you," he replied. "This is very different from the day when the service for your dear father was held in that empty church." "Yes, they are all here now," said Perrine, "and this is the order of the day, Grandpapa dear. I am to guide you to the steps exactly at 2 o'clock. From there, everyone will be able to see you. A man representing each village where you have your factories will come up the steps, and fatherly old Gathway and the name of all is to make a speech." At this moment, the clock struck 2. "Now give me your hand, Grandpapa dear," said Perrine. They reached the top of the steps, and a great cheer broke out. Then the dear old Gathway, who was the oldest employee, came forward alone. He was followed by the 5 delegates. 10 times the old man had been made to go over his speech that morning. "Monsieur Villefranche, it is to congratulate you on—" Here he stopped short and began gesticulating with his hands, and the crowd, who saw his eloquent gestures, thought that he was making an elaborate speech. After some vain efforts, during which he scratched his head several times, he said, "This is how it is. I had a fine speech all ready, but I've gone and forgot all I got to say. I had to congratulate you and thank you in the name of all from the bottom of our hearts."
He raised his hand solemnly. "I swear that so on the faith of your oldest employee, Gathwaye." Although the speech was very incoherent, nevertheless it touched Monsieur Villefranche deeply. With his hand on Perrine's shoulder, he moved forward to the balustrade. There all could see him from below. "My friends," he called out in a loud voice, "your sincere, kind wishes give me the greatest pleasure, all the more so as you bring them to me on the happiest day of my life, the day when I have found my little granddaughter, the daughter of my only son whom I have lost. You know her. You have seen her at the factory. She will go on with the work we have already begun, and I promise you that your future and your children's future is in good hands."
Thereupon he leaned down towards Perrine, and before she could protest, he lifted her up in his arms that were still strong and presented her to the crowd, then kissed her tenderly. Then a deafening cheer rang out. It was continued for several minutes. Cheers came from the mouths of 7,000 men, women, and children. Then, as the order of the day had been previously arranged, a line was formed, and in single file they passed before their old chief and his granddaughter. With a bow and a hearty wish, each man passed by. "Ah, grandpapa, if you could only see their kind faces," cried Perrine. But there were some faces that were not exactly radiant. The two nephews certainly looked very glum when, after the ceremony, they came up to their cousin to offer their congratulations. "As for me," said Taluel, who did not mean to lose any time in paying court to the young heiress, "I had always supposed—" The excitement of the day proved too much for Monsieur Villefranche. The doctor was called in.
"You can understand, doctor," said the blind man anxiously, "how much I want to see my little granddaughter. You must get me into a state so that I can have this operation." "That is just it," said the doctor cheerily. "You must not have all this excitement. You must be perfectly calm. Now that this beautiful weather has come, you must go out, but you must keep quiet. And I guarantee that as soon as your cough has gone, we shall be able to have a successful operation." And the doctor's words came true. A month after Monsieur Villefranche's birthday, 2 specialists came down from Paris to perform the operation. When they wished to put him under an anesthetic, he refused. "If my granddaughter will have the courage to hold my hand," he said, "you will see that I will be brave. Is it very painful?" They would use cocaine to alleviate the pain. The operation was over. Then came 5 or 6 days of waiting. The patient was kept in a dark room. Then, at last, the grandfather was allowed to see his little granddaughter. "Ah, if I had only had my eyes!" he cried as he gazed at Perrine's beautiful little face. "I should have recognized her at the first glance. What fools! Couldn't anyone have seen the likeness to her father? This time Taluel would have been right if he had said that he supposed." They did not let him use his eyes for long. Again the bandage was put on and was kept on for 30 days. Then one of the oculists who had remained at the chateau went up to Paris to select the glasses which would enable him to read and see at a distance. What Monsieur Villefranche desired most, now that he had seen Perrine's sweet face, was to go out and see his works, but this needed great precaution, and the trip had to be postponed for a time. For he did not wish to be closed up in a landau with the windows up, but to use his old phaeton and be driven by Perrine, and show himself with her everywhere. For that, they had to wait for a warm, sunny day. At last, the day they wanted came. The sky was blue, the air soft and warm. After luncheon, Perrine gave the order to Bastien for the phaeton with old Coco to be at the door. "Yes, at once, mademoiselle," he said with a smile. Perrine was surprised at the tone of his reply and his smile, but she paid no more attention to it, as she was busy fussing about her grandfather so that he would not take cold. Presently, Bastien came to say that the phaeton was ready. Perrine's eyes did not leave her grandfather as he walked forwards and down the steps alone. When they reached the last step, a loud bray made her start. She looked up. There stood a donkey harnessed to a phaeton. A donkey, and that donkey was like Palicare, a Palicare shiny and glossy, with polished shoes and adorned with a beautiful yellow harness with blue tassels. The donkey, with his neck stretched out, continued to bray. In spite of the groom's hold upon him, he turned and tried to get to Perrine. "Palicare!" she cried. She flew to him and flung her arms around his neck. "Oh, grandpapa, what a lovely surprise!" she cried, dancing around her dear Palicare. "You don't owe it to me," said her grandfather. "Fabry bought it from that rag picker to whom you sold it.
The office staff offer it as a gift to their old comrade. "Oh, hasn't Monsieur Fabry got a good, kind heart?" cried Perrine. "Yes, he thought of it, but your cousins did not," said Mr. Wolfren. "I have ordered a pretty cart from Paris for him. This phaeton is not the thing for him."
"Where shall we go first, Grandpapa?" she asked. "Why, to the log cabin," he said. "Don't you think I want to see the little nest where you once lived, my darling?" He referred to the cabin on the island where she had lived for a time the preceding year. It remained fondly in his mind. She drove on to the entrance and helped her grandfather alight at the path. The cabin seemed just the same as when Perrine left it. "How strange," said Monsieur Wolfren, "that only a few steps from a great industrial center you were able to live the life of a savage here." "In India we led a real savage life," said Perrine. "Everything around us belonged to us there. But here I had no right to this, and I was often very afraid." After Monsieur Wolfren had inspected the little log hut, he wanted to see the crèche at Maraucourt. He thought that he would easily recognize it, as he had so often discussed the plans with Fabry. But when he found himself at the entrance and was able to see at a glance all the other rooms, the dormitory where the little babies were asleep in their rose and blue cribs, according to the sex, the playroom where those who could walk were playing, the kitchen, the lavatory, he was surprised and delighted. Using large glass doors, the architect had cleverly made his plans so that from the first room the mothers could see all that went on in the other rooms where they were not allowed to enter. In the nursery, the children sprang forward and jumped upon Perrine, showing her the playthings that they had in their hands.
"I see that you are known here," said M. Wolfren.
"Known," replied Mademoiselle Bellhomme, greeting them. "She is loved by all. She is a little mother to them, and no one can play like she can."
M. Wolfren put his arms affectionately around his granddaughter as they went on to the carriage. They returned home slowly as evening fell. Then, as they passed from one hill to another, they found themselves overlooking the surrounding country, where new roofs and tall chimneys could be seen everywhere. M. Wolfren took Perrine's hand. "All that is your work, child," he said. "I only thought of business. See what you have done. But so that this can all be continued in the years to come, we shall have to find you a husband, one who will be worthy of you, who will work for us. We will not ask anything more of him. I think one day we shall find the right man, and we shall all be happy. En famille."
The end.